Welcome, everyone, to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, and with me for all of these Andor deep dives is my good friend and yours, Missy.
Hello again.
Yes, and we are covering Andor Season 2, Episodes 4, 5, and 6, all written by Beau Willimon, who wrote the Narkina 5 arc previously.
So basically, all the good speeches
all
were
the good
his.
speeches.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, he did adapt House of Cards for North America. He knows how to make a political speech.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So that is Ever Been to Ghorman? I Have Friends Everywhere. And What a Festive Evening.
Mm-hmm.
I did want to say we have been getting some great comments, especially about our discussion about some of the topics, the harder to talk about topics from last episodes. Minky Moo actually brought up that Mon has been wearing fish skeleton earrings and bone spiked necklaces, at least in the first 3 episodes, which I thought was really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also going to bring up a few things from the Andor Declassifieds, which is the other Declassified show that they decided to name their behind the scenes, the official behind the scenes
Features.
YouTube features, which I'm very happy they're doing because they are going to be talking. They talk a little bit about some of the cool behind the scenes that make and flesh out the world. But I had the name first.
That's right.
So absolutely cool comments we've been getting. Keep those up and we'll try to comment on those as we go. So into themes and motifs. You want to kick it off, Missy?
Yeah. So we're going to start. Last time, if you recall, we had a lot of circles. Not only were there circles in the visuals, but also characters were talking about entering a circle and being part of a circle. And so in this case, we have a lot of rectangles and boxes. And again, it appears not only in the visuals throughout all the episodes, but also characters refer to being in a box or boxed in. So this is definitely, again, a very deliberate motif. They did this on purpose. There are, of course, a few other shapes throughout, but the predominant shape that you get throughout is definitely rectangles and boxes. So that's a big one, and we'll call that out as we go through.
Yeah, and even in the geometric shapes in Ghorman are all look rectangular and boxy, and yeah, it's a great call out that they're all there. The thing I noticed particularly was a lot of call to love being the big desire, even though the times are dark or the things they have to do are really hard. Especially we have Bix and Cassian. Their apartment is always so dark, even in the day. It's grungy and dark, and yet they have this like little spark of love in there. We have Val, we have Cinta. We, of course, have other people that are craving connection and support. And it's really the thing that I've always pointed out in Star Wars. Sometimes they forget about. It's like, why do you fight? Why do you protect? Why do you put yourself out there? Well, it's because of love. It's because of family. It's because of interconnections. It's because of community and connection. And I think that's really, really important to show. And I'm really happy that it's such a forefront of this season. We already knew that this was going to be a forefront of this season, and we called it pretty much from the previews. Missy, so good on us.
Yeah, we were right again. Yeah, I think it's good, and I'm looking forward to talking about how they did approach it with some real complexity. There is an understanding that sometimes if you prioritize your personal relationships too much, then you're not looking out for the community. And on the other hand, if you don't prioritize personal relationships at all, then to your point, you have nothing to fight for. So I do think they did a really great job of illustrating both of those perspectives.
Yep. We do get a shot of like Luthen sort of reaching out and trying to be empathetic in these episodes. And we're going to call that out. But for the most part, he's fairly matter of fact when it comes to relationships. In fact, people have to like demand or beg or ask for to maintain relationships within the rebellion.
Yep. Yeah. He's very utilitarian about people, and the characters, they all kind of acknowledge that they have to fight Luthen in order to, like you said, maintain those connections. And it's very interesting. I think, and we'll see, but I have a feeling like where that might be going will be when push comes to shove with Kleya, because that's his closest relationship, and probably the only one where he has any real personal feeling involved. And so I'm very curious to see what happens with the two of them as things get more intense.
I would absolutely love a Kleya Luthen prequel book.
Yeah, just understanding how they got to the point that they're at by the time we see them at the beginning of season 1. So yeah, I would love that.
Also, there was an overall, it was repeated 3 times at least. So there was this idea of everything being too much. So we have too much for the ISB, too many prisoners or capturees to interrogate. We have too much for Kleya and Luthen to listen to all of the threads and communications and to weed through everything. And then we also have Mon and Perrin, who are complaining about too many, engagements to go to in the season, and also in that night that they had the party.
Yep.
It really feels like that's in tandem with the idea that they used to wait around and now they're trying to catch up. And that's just sort of where they are in the fervor of what is happening within the galaxy.
Yeah. Well, there's the momentum of the increasing rebellion across the galaxy, and they're the ones trying to organize it all and to make sure that it's effective, as it grows. And it's obviously it's a lot. It's a lot to do. It's a decentralized rebellion, and that's hard to manage. So that's why there are, in this case, we have this other rebel cell of the Ghorman front, and they need to figure out how they can coordinate, and they don't really have it worked out yet. But then, as you said, there's a number of other things they're also trying to track at the same time. So there's a lot. One thing I want to make sure that we don't miss here is just the general concept of underworld, overworld, hidden versus visible, and to the point of visible then touch as sight. So a few things. You already mentioned how there's love in the darkness, the idea that the love is always kind of hidden away. And we also see a lot of the rebel activity happening down deep underground, in a cellar, in a tunnel, in where like in the safe house, wherever. These are all places that are,
or the dark back of the shop. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So everything, whereas then you have the things that are up high and very visible, and these are things like where the ISB is and where Skulden's party is and all of these other things which are above and visible, and the armory that they're building at Ghorman and all these others. So you see that a lot, what is visible versus what is hidden. And to that point of what is hidden, touch as sight. So you have Bix and Cassian doing their little hand thing, and never have we seen so much hand intimacy.
Hand intimacy coordination was off the charts.
So much. And so there's that. There's obviously then you have Vel and Cinta. You have Kleya talking about the language of touch and as sight on the codex. You have Dedra telling Cyril to turn the lights out because they're going to touch each other, and she won't touch him until the lights are out. And so things like that. So this is something you see a lot. And I do think that these things are related. So over, under, dark, light, hidden, visible, touch as sight. I think these are all related concepts that we see throughout these episodes.
There's a lot of binaries, and things that are, again, hidden versus visible. We actually have a full symbol of a yin yang on Ghorman.
Yes.
And so, like, there's a lot of that binariness that has sort of bubbled to the surface that I don't think was in the previous 3 episodes.
I would agree.
Yeah. We, not really a motif, but definitely a theme that we're seeing, which is we see the things that will eventually lead to the downfall and rejection of the Senate. We see it in multiple scenes throughout all the episodes.
Yep.
Just sycophancy towards the emperor, things not working, not even trying. Just
Fear,
sort of
people falling to propaganda.
Yeah, everything. There's also an overall theme of to be alive, you must bleed or hurt. It's kind of like the idea, like, if you bleed, you know you're alive. And there's also like the idea that like there is a cost to living that you must pay in blood or in harm to yourself. And we see that a lot with Saw Gerrera and what he does. And then we see it as well with Clea, and we also see it with Ghorman. And it's, I mean, that's very apparent with how Rogue One turns out. But it's an important thing that they're even bringing up. And it's very subtle, except for the Clea scene, which is...
Yeah, the Clea scene is pretty
very
explicit,
obvious.
But the rest of it is like... Well, but it shows up in the dialogue too. If you want my blood, this is what I need from you. You know, like so the concept is there. So I think this is what's important to notice. The things that catch our notice are the ones where we see them repeated, both in the text and also then in the visual language. So there's a lot of that throughout, and so definitely I do think the concept of there is a cost in blood and everyone has to choose whether and how to pay it.
Exactly. So, one of the things I wanted to talk about a little bit was archetypes, life archetypes, which we do love to talk about. And we broke into a little bit near the end of last episode to talk about Bix and where she's at. And there are other types of archetypes that people could be in if, say, they're not actively experiencing a positive or a negative change. They could be in a flat archetype. And it feels like, just because of how the show is constructed, to kind of have these vignettes or these periods of a couple of days where a lot of things are happening from a progression of the rebellion, or these interesting moments within the rebellion for that year, that maybe we aren't getting transformational change, positive or negative, in these episodes. And like, that's a lot of like what we are drawn to with story, because change and transformation ties heavily to how mythic motifs present themselves. That being said, there is still things to talk about, but it's all just sort of laying the groundwork for what we think will happen in a more accelerated rate towards Rogue One's timeline.
Yeah, there's a lot of plot movement, but there's not as much character movement as I expected, or maybe as much as I wanted to see. Characters tend to your point, be relatively flat throughout the episodes. You don't see significant change, or the big changes happen off screen.
Yeah, we saw change happen between the first episode arc and the second arc, in that Bix and Cassian got together. Normally, we would like...
Supposedly, we were supposed to know, because I read, I guess it was an interview with, what was her name? Adriana? What is her name? Adria? I'm so sorry, guys. I forget. But yeah, the actress for Bix. But I guess there was an interview with her, and she said something like, "Oh yeah, it's so subtle. When Cassian says I need to get home, he's saying that he and Bix are together now." And I was like, that was not what I got from that at all. So apparently, they got together before the beginning of season 2,
but
and that's
even then,
really
it's still off
clear.
Screen.
Right, so it's off screen, but regardless, it's like it was really unclear. It wasn't very explicit until these episodes. And
she did call him her husband, but it could have been in a defensive way, and like,
yeah, she's protecting herself, so who knows? But like, I think my issue is we get an I love you in these episodes, and in my opinion, it does not hit. And the reason it doesn't hit is because you didn't see that evolution. Because their original relationship back when, before Tim and everything, that happened off screen. And now them getting together happened off screen. So it's like.
So we're missing kind of like the punchy character moments of like, this is when they fell in love.
Right.
This is when instead all we get is death.
Right.
Which is a choice. But it's not necessarily what draws me to Star Wars.
Right.
I come for the I love yous, the Leia and Han. I love you. I know. Like, that is a transformational moment. That is why we were watching that movie in that time.
Yeah. And this one is just like an I love you dropped in the middle of an argument. And it just didn't. I don't know. It didn't hit at all, in my opinion.
I mean, I believe in their love, but they also
they're in love,
at this point feel like we'll get to it. But it's hard, I would say, to say there's a lot of things that are going on, maybe from a mythic motif perspective, if people are in a flat state.
Right.
That's hard.
Yeah. So we'll see, and part of what we think we have seen in this episode, and of course we'll talk about it as we get into it, but part of what we think we have seen here is the idea that even if there was movement between archetypes, it wasn't transformational movement. It wasn't, hey, I'm progressing from one stage to another. So to remind everyone, the 6 stages that the archetypes that we're referring to in order are maiden, hero, queen, king, crone, mage.
Yeah.
And the theory being that eventually you come up against a crisis which forces you to abandon the previous one and progress on to the next one. And that's not really what we see here. Everyone kind of remains more or less in the same phase. Now, they might change from passive to active, but they're still in the same archetype. They haven't progressed.
Yeah. And actually, like, Bix probably experiences a negative to negative change. So we talked previous episode about how we feel like she's in this damsel phase, and actually she's very much still in this damsel phase. Damsels are
throughout.
Like what you associate with the word damsel, stuck in a tower, protected by those around her, literally protected by Luthen and by Cassian. You're not allowed to go out. You can't do that assignment. Like, you need more rest. And then I think that she has moved into a different maiden phase, which is a vixen, which is that she is defined by her aggression, and her aggression is defined by the people around her, her societal expectations, so the expectations of the rebellion, that she is going to be an aggressive rebel. And not necessarily on a positive change arc to become a hero in her own right. Right. And that's hard because, vixens are often really cool characters to watch on screen, but we know that they're very self-destructive.
Right. Because the whole thing with a vixen is that they're aggressive, yes, but they are still dependent. They do not stand on their own, because a heroic art is a process of, I keep wanting to say differentiate, but that's the wrong form of the word, but
individuate.
Thank you. I knew it was in there. So it's a process of individuation, which is the separating yourself from the parents and mentors and becoming your own person. And so that's the process that Bix needs to go through. And as long as everyone around her is either protecting her or kind
expecting
of
orders, like up, giving her orders to do things,
or serving her up her options on a platter
without her making her own choices.
Right. Then she's not really standing on her own as a hero. So I hope that we get that for Bix. We'll see.
And this ties really closely to the heroine's journey in the pre-phases before you're ready to go on a heroine's journey. and what we see throughout this episode arc primarily for her, if you listen to the like what Maureen talks about when you before you're ready to go on a journey, it often is talking about how you're waiting. Think about Rey when she's stuck on Jakku. She's waiting for her family. She's waiting for things to happen. Waiting is the theme of a person who's waiting to go on a heroine's journey. Like Maureen talks about how first you wait to see your father come home from school, then you wait to get married, and then you wait to have children, and then you wait for them to grow up. Like you're waiting and you're in this eternal waiting phase. And that's what we see from Bix. And actually we could argue, and we'll have to see where she ends up in the next episode arc, but that she has started a heroine's journey, even if it's very negative the way that she's chosen to go down it.
Yeah, we'll see.
Let's talk briefly about Luthen, who is, I would say, in a flat sort of king arc, which is a ruler. He is sort of using everybody as pawns around him.
Yes.
And it seems to be trying to encourage somebody else to start stepping into a king-like role because he knows that his death could happen at any point, which is an important step for the king. The king's end goal, and I do believe we will see it. We talked about this in our pre-episodes.
Yes.
That the king's goal is to die for the kingdom. And it could be a metaphorical death, of course. Sure. But in this story, the likelihood is it will be an actual death. And his death will mean something to the rebellion. And usually that means that he is looking for a queen to take his place. And we actually do have a queen archetype character in the version of Cassian. Being queen is all about protecting your home, your family, your lover. And unfortunately, he is in a negative version of that arc, which would be classified as a snow queen. He is aggressively protective. Or sorry, he is
the other way around. He's
passively protective. He has built a snow fortress around Bix.
Right. Well, around Bix and around himself, because he also doesn't want to engage, for example, he doesn't want to take any risks on behalf of the rebellion. So he doesn't want to engage with the Ghorman front because he just doesn't see a path to success. So he doesn't want to take any risks. And he's really only interested in getting back to Bix and protecting her. And that's the only thing he cares about. And so he's actually risking the rebellion. And we see Luthen call him out on this. He's actually risking the rebellion by focusing so much on what he wants to protect.
Exactly.
And so what Luthen is trying to do is to push him into that king archetype where he can take the bigger view, right?
Yeah.
Take the bigger view, see the entire community and try to make decisions about what's best for all of them.
And oftentimes that happens when the previous king dies and the invaders are invading the castle.
That's right.
So there's going to need to be a crisis to push Cassian into that king phase, which we totally think is going to happen.
Yep.
But what's really important for me is that it happens on screen, please.
Yes. I mean, I think it will. I think they've Luthen was created for this series, and I don't think that they're going to have us invest this much in his character and then not see his end. I would be I'd be pretty pissed if that was the case.
But I want to see Cassian's change. Like that's important to me. And he's been kind of not necessarily stuck. He was certainly like a hero phase before. And we've seen him be a queen, but I want to see the transformation from queen to king.
We also talked about how the previous 3 episodes, certainly for the first 2 anyway, he was, I called him like Ivanhoe or Bilbo or Bilbo Baggins, right? Because these are characters who during intense crisis moments in their communities are MIA. They're not there. They're either asleep or whatever. They're not present.
Not appearing in this film.
Right, exactly. And that was Cassian, at the beginning of this season, was because he was a captive for 2 episodes. He was not involved in the other events that were happening in the story. And here in these episodes, his only only involvement was to go to Ghorman and then come out and go, nah, no thanks. So he just like, again, he's not engaged as much with the action. He's not the character that is moving the action forward. So I think what we're seeing a lot, and part of why, to your point about the flat archetypes, I think one of the reasons that's happening is because things happen to characters. Characters don't make things happen. And I think the more we have characters actually taking risks and being the agents of change in the story, the more we're going to see that those big transformations occur.
I agree. And so I don't want to say that as a critique from like, I'm not enjoying the episodes. They're not doing things for me. They're incredibly well written and there's a lot of amazing things. But I come to Star Wars for transformational moments. And so not seeing as many of those or just like seeing a lot of build up for transformational moments is a little bit harder to be like, oh, this is why this is important and this is what this means. It doesn't mean it's not a great spy show and it's not a great Star Wars show and it's not a great sci-fi show. It's just, it's not as much as of what I come to Star Wars particularly for. Yeah.
It's just plot-driven action instead of character-driven action. That's all. And that can obviously change. I think the second half of the series is just be interesting to see. Because to your point, a lot of this has been set up. So it's, hopefully we're going to start to get some payoff.
Exactly.
Plus, we know K2SO is coming. And that's just going to be so fun. I cannot wait.
You have no idea how excited I am to have Alan Tudyk back and everything. Okay. Let's dig into episode 4.
Yeah.
Ever been to Ghorman? No, you ever been to Ghorman?
I guess we have now.
Now we have. So it starts off with Bix with a combo nightmare. Don't you love those when two of your nightmares decide to have a baby and make it even worse?
Horrible.
So she's having a dream, a nightmare, a walking, not just a nightmare, but she's also sleepwalking, I think.
Yes.
Or it's some sort of live delusion.
Yeah.
Where Dr. Gorsh is actually interrogating the person that Cassian had killed on their previous mission. So it's a big hodgepodge of probably guilt as well as her own experiences that she's still working through with Dr. Gorsh.
Yeah. And he ends up being very much sort of, obviously he genuinely was a villain in her life, but also he ends up being sort of the avatar of all of her nightmares, even the ones that are not directly related to him. So
absolutely,
that's where he has kind of been built up in her mind as sort of the root of all of her trauma. And so she's definitely looking.
And she doesn't even really blame Cassian, even though he says, like Cassian said, he had seen your faces, so he has to go. And he's not even really putting up a fight and all of that. But she doesn't blame, it doesn't seem like she's blaming Cassian. She's just trying to figure out how to put all of that guilt around having that guy killed, basically. But Cassian grabs the gun. She sort of wakes up. They sort of agree that it's worse now that they're back at this like home or wherever they are, this safe house. And it's harder to deal with trauma and addiction and anxiety and all of these different pieces that can be quite dark if it's quiet, if you're not constantly on the move, if you're not dealing with adrenaline. And so like acknowledging that I thought was quite important.
Yeah, agreed. And I do want to mention that throughout the apartment, everything is rectangular, lots of perpendicular lines. So again, the sort of those boxed motifs throughout everything all there. And multiple times throughout the episode, the apartment itself is referred to as a box. So we'll get to that as well. But then we pop over to Ghorman and the capital city of Palmo. And I do have quite a bit to say about this city.
Okay, Go ahead.
All right. So first thing, is it a walled city in the shape of a 7-pointed star or heptagram? This is typically used to indicate magic, maybe fairy or elven magic. It indicates perfection, harmony, balance. And so the real point that's being made here with this view of Palmo is Ghorman was a culture, a society in harmony before the empire came in and started causing trouble.
Yeah, which we could tell by the themes and motifs that are presented with spiders and with how they operate and all of that stuff. So it's saying it on multiple levels, which is great.
Right. But the fact that they come in with that, the other thing I want to mention is that very noticeable right from the start there, the Ghorman soundtrack is a waltz.
Oh, yes, it is. I was saying it was romantic and definitely
it's a waltz specifically.
And there's also like squeeze box or accordion in there to remind you of France.
Right. Well, France, it's also associated with Switzerland, Austria.
Yeah, it's kind of like that lower European quarter, because they also in like the Declassified episodes behind the scenes talk about how it's supposed to be Upper Italy inspired.
Yes, because that's the thing, is that whole area there, northern Italy, Switzerland, parts of Western Austria, that whole area there, it's an interesting blend of several different cultures. It's known for being more Germanic, but to that point, it has Italian, it has French, it has a lot of different influences. In Switzerland, the three main languages are German, French, and Italian. And if you listen to them spoken, you'll actually notice that there are inflections and accents of the other languages in whatever language is being spoken. So German sounds a good bit softer. In Switzerland, it's almost with a French pronunciation. And I thought the way that the Gore spoke was very reminiscent of that. So
they have made their own language.
Yes, which is so cool, by the way. I love when they do that.
And they actually referred to Esperanto, which is like a made up sort of Latin-based language that you could use for things, but they said it's as robust as that, which is impressive because it has its own dictionary and everything, and that's a lot of work to go into it. But it's supposed to sound a lot like French and sort of those languages kind of all combined, which you get it, and it feels like that, and I mean, wow, that was a lot of work to give it this world building. It successfully
calls on what we recognize from our world while still feeling like a Star Wars world, which is really cool. And then I will say there are more softer lines throughout all of Ghorman compared to the rest of the episode. The rest of the episode is quite stark. Again, all those hard perpendicular lines. But in Ghorman, even though there are still rectangles and whatnot, everything is softened slightly. There are more curved corners and things like that. So you do see just that
the windows are circular in places.
It's elegant.
Yeah. And there's also like curves to the edges of the parallelograms and the geometric shapes. The corners themselves are curved to take away some of the harshness. So,
larger corner radius there. Anyway, so but what's really cool about that is particularly the way it's used immediately in this first scene after that establishing shot, because now you have Cyril, he's getting himself ready in the morning, and he looks in the mirror and he sees behind him through the window that someone is spying on him.
A circular window.
Not just circular, it's shaped like an eye.
Ah, that's interesting. Yes.
Like the circle is the iris, but then there's also the off to the side, the elongated section. So it actually looks like an eye, a giant eye, which is very cool. So, and then of course he travels on his way to...
When he ties a little line so that he can see...
That's right. He has
like a little hair or like a little... That'll break if somebody has entered his apartment.
Yes, so he can know. So we know that just from the beginning, from these few details, we know that he knows he's being watched, followed, etc. And so
he already has a bunch of the spiders on his shelf.
Yes.
Too. Right. But that seems to be the only thing that he's added to this place. It doesn't feel like he really lives there.
Yeah.
Which is
interesting.
Well, that's him.
That's him, but he doesn't do anything that isn't regulation. But because we get those details when he is walking to work, and they start with the voiceover of the conversation with the mother. I certainly suspected it. Yeah, I certainly suspected immediately that this conversation was being tapped.
Yeah, same. Yeah,
because of how they had set everything up. So
it was
you
well
instantly
done.
Right. You instantly understand that someone is listening in on this conversation.
And I loved when they actually do flash to her. She's sitting there with her hair in a hairdryer, like a classic one that you would have at like a beauty salon.
Yeah,
the full headed thing. But she's razzing him like she always used to, which is like, you know, you had a respectable career and a relationship. Things were going so well. Why are you banished out to the outer rim?
Yep. Yeah. No, it's exactly. And it's so interesting everything they do here, because on the one hand, I think, again, similar to, we know it's being tapped even before we see it. Again, immediately suspect he's probably here at Dedra's behest, because based on where they were in the last 3 episodes, we understand this is the next logical step. And so we know that he obviously didn't break up with her, and that he's there literally as a plant. But then the other thing that I thought was fascinating was some of the conversation. So the mother's going, "I'm not buying Ghorman again. They were always too good for the rest of us." And he responds, "You're watching too much Imperial news." And she tries to insist that, no, I had these opinions well established before that. Like, she tries to insist that she's actually a free thinker, right? And she says, "Those holodrops, this mockery of Emperor Palpatine, you must have seen them. Scandalous." So apparently there are holos out there that are critical of Palpatine, and of course his loyal followers are just horrified.
Yeah.
And he tries to explain to her, it's propaganda. You're being sold these ideas. And this whole conversation was deeply uncomfortable to listen to, because I feel like a lot of us have probably had this exact same conversation with family.
Yep.
In recent years.
This place is hardly a threat to the Empire. Felt so like he actually does believe it, but he knows he's there to do something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's where I do wonder where they're going with this, because especially later, given the brief conversation between Dedra and her supervisor that, make sure that you keep Cyril in the dark about what we're really doing. I mean, how much is he going to be shocked and horrified when he comes to full realization of what they're doing? Because I think he's such a true believer in the Empire that I think he believes that what he's doing is justice.
Yeah. I mean, he's trying to get the insurgents to bite on something with regards to the Ghorman Front. So either that she's hyped up what the Ghorman Front represents, or, I need you, right? Also, the actress talked about how psychopathic women often use men to do their dirty work for them.
Yep.
And so she's like, I'm totally playing into this with Cyril and everything like that. I do love that the Ghorman friend who's listening in on their conversation actually also thinks that his mother is terrible.
Yeah. It's part of the reason they trust him is because they
sort of pity him. Yeah. And Caro Raylands, who's the main guy who's kind of running the Ghorman Front, actually looks almost exactly like my grandfather, who's from Germany.
Oh my gosh.
And kind of has that look of European guy at the time.
Everybody had the look. I thought so very much. Yeah,
they definitely didn't look like they had seen a cell phone.
Excellent point.
Right? Like they didn't. They didn't look like they knew what a cell phone was. So they came in looking like they were from 1930s, 1935, 1940s Europe, or a galaxy far, far away. Good job at casting.
Yeah, it was solid. Well done. Well done. Yeah. So then, although I want to come back to that later, because I do have some feelings about some topics that are being studiously avoided by this show that I feel like are kind of glaring. So we'll get to that.
Okay.
But so then we pop back to Bix and Cassian, and they're going to pick up some food. And this is where you start to see Cassian's overprotectiveness and his paranoia. And Bix is genuinely annoyed with him because she wants to be out and she wants to be interacting with people. And I love when she's like, the mission is dinner.
Yeah. We're going to go get some melons and some spicy peppers.
Yeah.
You don't need to be so paranoid. Yeah.
But the way that he talks over her, I don't love that.
No. And he's way overprotective. Like even in the shop, like, oh, do we need that? Or, can't we just go? Like what kind of life are you living if you actually can't even live your life?
Yeah, exactly. And we do see them then cooking, which is something we haven't seen enough of in Star Wars, in my opinion.
Yeah,
We've seen dinner. Some, but not very much. So, Cassian's making dinner, and they start talking about the soldier that they had to kill. And on the one hand, I think you could say Cassian doesn't really feel guilt about it. On the other hand, I would say he doth protest too much.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. I think that this is he's justified it a lot in his brain.
Yes.
Justified away. Yeah.
Well, he talks about that in Rogue One when he tells Jyn, every time I did something terrible that I would tell myself that I did it for the rebellion. And basically saying, if we don't win, it wasn't all worth it. And you do see the roots of that here, because that's basically what Bix says to him. She says, if I'm going to do all of this, I want to win.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and so that's really important. But you also hear the reference to being boxed in. He says, it's tough like this, boxed in. So again, we have that appearance of like we're trapped in a box again.
We also have back to Gore, we have the boy who finds Cyril on his way to work or out from work, who gives him a spider which has a candy inside, which has a note on the wrapping paper. And I wrote down the worst Tootsie Pop in existence.
Oh my gosh, terrible. So
those spiders, the spider models are very creepy.
Oh my gosh. It's instead of a Kinder egg, you get like a spider egg.
Yeah, it is like the gosh. Kinder surprise of
exactly.
Of Ghorman.
Spider surprise.
It's the Tootsie Pop rebellion invite. There you go.
It's so funny. But then so he goes, he sees that, okay, my tripwire's broken. Somebody was in my apartment. And instead of being disturbed, it was interesting because I kind of thought, oh, someone's in his apartment. This is going to get intense. And then he just kind of casually walks in. So it was obvious he knew that they hadn't stuck around. But he also took it as a good signal for, I've caught their attention. They're
been investigated. Me. They're listening in. They're watching me. They sent me this invite. Yeah.
Yeah. So he goes to the office to call Dedra on a secure channel. He's so excited to tell her that the rebels made contact. And this is classic Cyril, right? He's just so very excited to be of service to the Empire.
Yeah, I called him Puppy Cyril.
Yes, very much.
Yeah, because he is very, like, he very much needed purpose, and he needs to feel like he is appreciated for that purpose.
Yep. Absolutely. So he goes to her and he wants approval. And the way that he feels he's going to get her approval is because she's going to share this news with her boss. And of course, then she's being very, very, very cautious. So she's like, no, I'm not going to tell him yet. And Cyril's kind of disappointed. He's like, oh,
okay.
But I did good.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
But it's interesting that he has to even sneak into his office. Like, he doesn't even have that much, like, I can't even go in and work late like a supervisor probably should. Like.
Right. Well, and this is where we come back to, I do think there's such sincerity behind his actions and his motivation that I do think that at some point he might be genuinely horrified by what happens. I really do. Like, on one hand, he's putting on a front, and on the other hand, I just think he's really naive.
I think he's really naive too. And I think that he'd do anything for approval.
Yeah, agreed.
And we're back to the ISB where Dedra is sort of just watching everything cool happen. Yeah. And she's like, I can't talk about my mission. Dang.
She's so bitter.
She's so bitter and cranky. Yeah. But we have Lonnie who kind of steps in amongst this like embarrassing situation. This is the first time we see that there's too much happening, right? So the ISB is arresting too many people. They have too much backlog. They can't keep up with it. And honestly, like, kudos to Lonnie for being like a kick-ass spy.
Yeah, he's
and like
good.
Pushing people in the right directions. And also like, you know, sort of winning favors with those people that Dedra is pissing off.
Yeah. Well, he's able to, like, he's always very intelligently, he's supporting people and backing them up, but he's never taking lead. He even says it later. He says it to the other character. He says, well, you're taking lead on this. So he always makes it so that he's sort of not drawing too much attention to himself.
Yeah.
You know, so
Hurt is his name. Deidre's former Hurt. But I love that Dedra is like, you should have brought me in. He's like, well, I'll bring you in if I need you. And she's like, well, my office is always open.
She's so pissed.
She's so pissed. She wants to be involved in something cool because she's literally sick of waiting for stuff to develop slowly on the Ghorman front.
Right. The other thing I wanted to mention is that when they talk about the need to, quote, amplify their intake process, I wonder if that is what lays the groundwork for later the expansion of Dr. Gorst's program. Yeah. I wonder if that was like a way to deal with the backlog, was like, well, let's use more of his methods.
Yeah, like let's actually make it into a program. I absolutely do think so. And also one of the subtle things about having people sort of believe in a friendship or in a relationship is having them do things for you. So when he, speaks with her, he's like, how can I repay you? It's like, well, buy me lunch. Like that's a reciprocal relationship now rather than just a one-way street. And he no longer owes him, which means their relationship is closer.
And that's how he gets the intel about what Dedra actually
they
is
went for lunch
on.
And there's like, what is she? Why is she so cranky? Like, obviously, that's what happens.
But it's interesting because that's another example of something that's not on screen. So you really do have to put it together that later when he tells Luthen and he says, I think only 3 people know this.
Yeah, it's literally Dedra, Partags, and Hurt who know.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, but it goes back to this thing of, it's weird to me, some of the things that are on screen versus off screen. Some of the on screen stuff, I'm just like, did we need that much detail? And then other things, I'm like, that would have been nice to actually have that happen where we could
lunch
see it.
Scene where we could actually see him.
The lunch scene would have been great. Yeah. So, so whatever. But then we move over to Mon, who's trying to drum up votes to end the PORD.
And if you've ever watched any sort of like U.S. Senate or congressional, anything that's fictionalized associated this is whipping votes.
Yep.
This is what is called whipping votes. And it definitely shows the breakdown of the Senate in that trusted allies or people that she could have trusted to work with her in the past are no longer sort of amenable to that because they're scared to piss off the emperor. They don't want to be seen on the bad side of things. And really, all she's trying to get rid of is the PORD, which is the Public Order Resentencing Directive that affected Andor, Cassian, in the first season, where his sentence was like crazy increased for just like being in the wrong place at the wrong time. She's just trying to get rid of that, which really wouldn't affect the Empire probably all that much and would pull back some of this craziness where they have so many people arrested. So much is happening because they've basically amped up their like terror campaign of just arresting criminals. And she talks about that.
Yeah, she has that line about, are we finding criminals or making them? And she talks about how in places that were really peaceful and had really low crime rates, that the convictions have increased so much over the last few years. And her point, of course, is that these people they're not actually, like, they're not bad or dangerous people. They didn't really do anything wrong. It's just that is what authoritarian regimes do, is they criminalize things that are harmless that people are already doing, so that they can paint those people as illegitimate, and therefore you should not support them, you should not ally with them. It is a way of dividing and weakening people by taking this group of people and just sort of magically making them criminals overnight. And of course, that is also what's happening right now.
Yeah. And we also get the question of, like, why Ghorman, right? Which is why is this particular group, this planet being targeted? And as a Canadian, I also feel that in this time, why us? Or why Greenland? Or why Panama? And the truth is, because of the resources that are available, or the access, or the thing that somebody wants. If there is no reason to go after a place, why Ghorman is what is underneath the ground, or what is something that only they have. Other than spiders.
And no one really knows. And it's so well done, because, you know, again, it does require some level of understanding about how things really work in the real world, but it's helpful. So when he says Ghorman is a single product economy, we import almost everything we need to survive, and they didn't have to blockade us very long for us to understand how vulnerable we are. And so this was really critical, is that they have been able to weaken Ghorman through a combination of the economic blockade, through or not unlike tariffs, and then also the propaganda talking about how Gore are so arrogant and all this other stuff, and we don't want to be seen as allying with them, because that won't look good to the public and that kind of stuff. And then, of course, the last tool that they're using is deliberate outrage in order to try to gin up this rebellion in response.
And also turning public opinion against, like, that's what the PR campaign is primarily doing, is turning public opinion so that when the atrocities do happen, it's all justified. Right.
And that's said quite explicitly later by Krennic, where he, says, oh, well, those were just criminals. Basically, he's suggesting they had it coming. Right. And so,
which is the same terminology that they used for Jewish people in the lead up to World War II, in Germany and in Europe. They classified them as communists and criminals, and so they were justified in doing what they wanted.
Or if it happened, it was not entirely at fault. That was kind of how they treated it. So then we get back to Lonnie, who's telling Luthen about Dedra running the Ghorman project. And I want to mention briefly that this and then the following scene of the town hall, these are both underground. And so back to this idea of the things that are hidden, which are deep down underground, versus the things that are visible, which are often fake, but above ground where everyone can see. So a lot of that going on. And Luthen specifically says, well, a smear campaign is an opening move, not the end game. So he understands there must be something else they want from Ghorman, but no one really knows what it is.
Exactly. And he says, like I can't wait 3 months. I can't wait, right? But then Lonnie's like, well, you used to tell me to wait. And it's like, well, those days are gone. But I love that Luthen, who, when we previously saw them in this exact same place, Lonnie was in the elevator and Luthen was like 30 feet away from him. Like giving him the best speech of his life. Beau Willimon loves this location. But he's like literally in his face in the doorway. He is that close to show those days of being cautious, those days of waiting, those days of like waiting for things to come into the net are gone. Yeah. I'm in your face now.
Yeah, the urgency is there. He has to be right there.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
And we actually haven't really gotten to the urgency step. This is like pre-urgency.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Like, well, because you have to understand when he says, you know, I need to know the end game. We know that what we're moving toward is this race against time where they come to the realization that there is a super weapon out there and they have to stop it or there will be no rebellion. And so because that's where they are in Rogue One is we know there's a super weapon, but we don't have enough information about it. So we know this is the beginning of that. This is, you know, the Ghorman campaign is about getting the Calkite for the reactor on the Death Star and blah, 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 blah. And like no one has any of this information. It's all very, very hush hush. And so just now, Luthen is starting to get the first pieces of it. And he can't see where it's leading. And so, yeah, it's really well done. It's really interesting. And you can definitely feel sort of the unease, I think, that Luthen has as he starts to realize there's something really big at play and he just doesn't know what it is.
So the meeting underground with the Ghorman in the conversations is more like a town hall. Like I would say like it's a town hall, like the counselors there, they're all trying to like listen to people's complaints. And we get like a good mix of people talking, like a high up businessman who, you know, has an estate of spiders. We have a regular working guy, and then we have an old lady who's like, they promised they wouldn't overshadow the memorial. You know, my boy, you know, my son died in this, and you know, Tarkin's. They promised, you know, and the promises have all been broken by now, but just slowly over time. And this is where Cyril ends up and finds himself, and both. The boy who has, and I'm trying to find his name in like IMDb.
Yeah, I can't find it either. But I
this is the boy who is ultimately is our problem child, and he is throughout every single episode, everywhere.
Yeah, he is. He's very, very engaged. He's passionate, right? And so that's really, really important is that he's passionate, but he's reckless as a result. And but I do want to also mention that the sort of working class man that we saw there, Lazine, he says this thing about how, they move people into boxes and then move the boxes downwind. So this gets back to the boxes again. Here we have more boxes in the script. So again, it's this idea of being boxed in, closed in, and So
absolutely
contained once more.
So Cyril is approached by both the boy who translates the old woman and kind of gives him some more context, as well as Enza, who's the daughter of our main counselor who's running the Ghorman front. And they all kind of confirm what Cyril already knows is true, but, you know, everything is drowning in rumors, but they know it's an armory. Everybody knows it's an armory, but, you know, they don't want to see themselves returned to, and truthfully, they're probably a little bit shy because 16 years ago, Tarkin massacred a bunch of Ghormans, and I was only able to find the answer for this. So it happened the day after Empire Day.
Oh.
And this is in the lead up to Empire Day, because they basically steal the weapons the day of the massacre, because it's overnight. So 16 years ago, they had this peaceful, unarmed protest, and they were all massacred by Tarkin.
Yeah, he landed. And what I found interesting about this was that a lot of what we had read before the season came out was, this is going to depict the Ghorman massacre. And there may still be something like that yet to come. But what's interesting here is the fact that they specifically placed it well before that. So they didn't update the canon to make it happen later. Instead, they actually kept it very early, to your point. And so this idea that This is part of their history and explains a lot of their actions and behaviors. And the idea that it is a harbinger of what could happen, if things go wrong, and that they've been made an example of before and they could be again.
Yeah. And also that, in some ways they're very hesitant to engage in this rebellious behavior because of what has happened previously.
Yeah.
And they haven't needed to.
Right. And that goes directly into then Luthen calling on Cassian. He wants him to assess the Ghorman Front's preparedness for rebellion. And he says something to that effect, it must be bad if the peaceful war are going to get off their comfortable asses and do something about it. So he acknowledges that whatever's happening must be big because it's motivating the Ghorman to take a reckless action that they're not known for.
No. So yeah, this is where Luthen sort of engages with this and calls in Cassian through an ever awake in the middle of the night insomniac Bix
Poor
who
Bix.
sees the light.
Poor Bix.
And Luthen and Cassian meets, and he says the line, "Ever been to Ghorman? It's clean work. We just need an assessment. We need to know who's running the Ghorman Front, and they can't see me because I don't trust anybody."
Yep. Yeah. So it's again, I think the plot structure on this is just so solid. So it's really good seeing them kind of move all the pieces into place. But then we move on to Dakar. Oh my gosh,
Dakar.
Are you excited to see it?
When I saw it, I died, and I posted. I'm like, Dakar heart. Like it feels so good to see it, knowing what we know about this place. Like, yeah, it would be like it's good to see something from the sequel trilogy.
Yes, yeah, just having anything from the sequel trilogy acknowledged is really nice.
Yeah. And that we knew that it was a former rebel base, and like we knew all these things. And that Wilmon is helping out the rebellion, and he's very good at keeping his mouth shut.
Yes, which is an important skill, I think, when you're around this group. So yeah, so they're there where Saw Gerrera is encamped, and he has a device for siphoning fuel.
Rhydonium.
Yes, Rhydonium. Yeah. And Saw's kind of creepily obsessed with the smell of Rhydonium.
Yeah, I was like, is it like those people that really like to sniff gasoline, I guess?
Basically.
Yeah.
Well, he explains it later, right?
Yeah. He does. Yeah. But he's like, oh, you got to go and teach this Pluty guy how to do all these variations, and it's a lot of variations, and you have to you have to know 8 different starting places, and then each of those have variations on top of it. So it's a lot of memorization and sensitive work. And Wilmon is like a rock star, so he knows it all already.
Yeah, but Saw, Will wants to be like, okay, well, just tell me what your target is, and then I can cater my lessons to that. And Saw's like, nope, we're not telling you. You have to teach him everything, which means that Will has to stay, because it's going to be really difficult to teach all of this. Saw also wants to know, where did you learn this? And Will, again, to your point, mouth shut, will not share, not going to tell him.
Yeah.
Like where he learned it, just that he did. And so, yeah, we start to get into, at least Saw himself certainly wants to know more strategic information, and Will is smart enough not to tell him. Yeah. And that, of course, will come into play later.
Exactly. And then we finish out the episode with Cassian and Bix, and of course, this very intimate hand-touching scene. Yeah. So I wanted to ask you what you saw in the hand movements. Because people are like, I saw letters in Arabesh. I personally see the Andor symbol.
Yeah,
because it's like a movement around the edge, and then like the up and down of it. I'm
not sure that I could tell. I did watch a couple times trying to work out what was happening, and I truly could not tell. If I were forced to guess, I wonder how much it might be related to like a lifeline, because the first thing they trace is down the center of the palm.
Yeah.
And so that to me would be very poignant if that was the case, just because of we know certainly how Cassian's story ends and likely how Bix's ends as well.
Yeah.
So I thought that was very interesting. But it was just overall the idea of that's not the scene where they kiss. They kiss later, but that's not the one. And instead, it's still just this very intimate, I guess, farewell ritual that they're doing almost is how it feels.
It did feel like that. And actually, to me, in so many ways, that was more intimate and touching. Like the hand touching was more
agreed
than the kissing. Not that I
agreed.
Not that I minded the kissing, but
No, we like smooches, but still, it definitely had more of the emotional intimacy for sure. And then immediately following that, we have Cassian taking the elevator down. Again, this idea of going down into the underworld. He's going to where he will be hidden, because he's taking on a false identity.
Yeah.
He's taking on a false identity. And meanwhile, then Bix stays behind to wait in her tower, and she takes drugs to help her sleep.
Yeah. Which reaffirms her damsel nature in this episode completely.
Yeah, it's almost a Sleeping Beauty thing in a way.
Yeah.
Like her taking the drugs is like her pricking her finger. It's like she's gonna fall asleep until the hero comes to wake her up.
Exactly. She's not gonna wake up. And even when she does wake up, it's like you're waking up, but like not at your own behest.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Let's move on to episode 5. I Have Friends Everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
So it starts out actually with the Andor symbol and the music, but it cuts to and sort of changes to the radio frequency of Clea's, like changing through all of the different recordings that she's got and all of the different things that she's listening to. And then we see it open on her trying to listen to, I'm guessing, a recording of Skulden, where they do mention that there is a forgery in his collection and he's so pissed off.
Mm-hmm.
Cassian himself is getting prepped with new clothes, and I loved this scene. I was like, these people, I love them. I don't know.
They're just random characters, but I like the idea of there being characters like this that kind of come in and out, and you don't spend time with them, but they're interesting.
You're just like, I like that guy Bon. He looks like a weird tailor. Let's go.
Yeah. But this is also where we hear that code that they have.
Visiting friends. Why do you ask? I'm curious by nature. I have friends everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Is the whole line, and they use it a couple of times in the whole show. Yeah.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so we also hear the voiceover start, which is, "You're going to be Varian Sky, and this is going to be your deal."
Which I love. I love that. So as with so many names in this story, it's entirely based on how it sounds to the ear. So like Dedra, for instance, sounds like dead. Mm-hmm. She's dead inside. She's Dedra, right? And so then we already talked about Skulden sounding like skullduggery. Mm-hmm. And I think, there was another character, I think one of the propaganda guys, I think, had a name that sounded like dissembling or something like that. So they all have these names which are intended to call up this. And so I love that Varian Sky, it's like he's a variant. It's literally like, hey, we're going to give you a variation of yourself. This is your latest, identity. And so it's funny because it implies that all of them are Varian, which of course they're not, but that's the implication. And then Sky being just the most Star Wars name ever. So I loved it. Yep, with an E. So it was really fun.
We have Cyril, who is just in his office doing his thing, and an ISB tech team comes in to search the office because they think there's listening devices in there. And there's a whole lot of his coworkers or people that report to him going, "Oh no!" and the red flags go up, and they take down the connection. Feed.
Yeah,
they cut the feed. Yeah,
right. But it's all to just make them trust him.
Yeah, exactly. We also have Clea, who is figuring out that, oh no, the listening device could potentially be a problem. that they are very unhappy about one of the pieces in the collection being a forgery.
Yep.
We learn more about Cassian's character. He's going to be a fashion designer. He has a whole history. He has a whole address. It's pretty bulletproof for something that's only going to be him going in and kind of pretending to be a guy.
Yeah.
It feels like they put a lot of work into his sort of cover.
And ultimately, I feel like the purpose of that is to be a contrast against how loosey-goosey the Gore are when he finally meets with them. Like here, like you said, just for coming into town for a couple of days just to kind of look at everything, he's got this airtight identity and all this detail and everything. And meanwhile, then the Gore just kind of fly by the seat of their pants. And he's very underwhelmed when he meets them, but we'll get to that. So...
but Cyril is planning on going home. That's at the same time, because I was like, oh no, are they going to be on the planet at the same time? No. As luck would have it, he's decided to go visit his girlfriend and I guess his mother.
Well, he's also going back, I think, because he's supposed to check in person.
Yes, right? I do think so. Yeah.
So,
but the Ghorman pull him aside. The Ghorman friend pull him aside to be like, oh, you seem upset. What's going on? It's like, oh, it's the ISB, because they had found out more about his background, that he had run into the ISB before, and he certainly has reasons to not like the ISB now.
Right. Yeah, they assume he has a grudge.
Yes. Luthen decides to check in on Bix, and this scene itself is really interesting because Stellan Skarsgård actually talked about it in the Declassified episode, that he goes there because of empathy.
Yeah.
He empathizes with their situation, and especially with where Bix is at, but he's very like, can I still use this person? Is this a tool I can still use? Because he's like, you're not part of the rebellion unless you have empathy of some sort.
Yeah.
But their conversation is really interesting in that she almost wants something. She wants a mission to take her away from what she's doing, which is just kind of drowning in her own darkness, as well as, he notices the drugs. He sort of questions all of it. They have a really good back and forth about bravery and what they deal with to do this work. Drugs are often a metaphor for the dark side. You can't stop taking them because then you actually, they don't hit as well the next time that you tap into the dark side, into the darkness. And that he even says like, well, they don't work as well the next time you do them. And yeah, it's addictive in that way because you want to pull yourself away from the pain that you're experiencing by drowning it, by numbing it, etc. And it never works quite as well the next time.
Yeah. I think it's a very relatable analogy for a lot of people. Like addiction, many people feel that it is their dark side because it is something that has power over you and is very difficult to, to push back on. So it's very interesting the way that they handle it. Also, we see the box thing again here because he says being stuck here in this box. So again, we continue to hear it in the script throughout. So we acknowledge this. But it's very interesting that when he says, oh, you should rest, yes, on the one hand, he's being kind of patronizing like Cassian is and being like, oh, no, you're not ready. You can't handle it. And on the other hand, he specifically says, I'll find something more exciting. So he does kind of acknowledge that what she needs is something bigger. She's feeling the need for making a bigger impact. She doesn't want these little missions, right?
Yeah.
She wants something bigger. So
and she also doesn't want to be treated like she's an invalid either. She wants to be respected.
Want to be treated like she's delicate. She gets very upset about that.
Yeah. We do have a brief, Willamon teaching stuff, and we do see that Pluti is trying to like probe him for information, and he's not giving anything up. And then we have Cyril sort of checking in with the team in that they had talked to him about what they need when they had asked about it. And he decides to help them purposefully, right? Give them enough information, give them enough rope to like hang themselves a little bit. And so he gives them the full transportation schedules, knowing that it doesn't really give anything away, but it would give them enough to actually work with. And he's wearing his little beret because he's now joined the army.
Right. Yeah, but he's got the copy of the transport data. He passes it off. He takes the spider for his mom.
Yeah.
And ultimately, of course, what they're able to discover from it is that the transports without manifests or bill of lading or whatever, those say that it requires military clearance, military security clearance.
Which is pretty obvious.
So they're like, okay, well, it's weapons then.
Yeah, it's probably weapons.
Yep. So.
And we cut back to Clea, who meets with Skulden's curator, I guess is her job. Yeah. Maybe his art buyer, maybe, or something, or his antiquities buyer. But she's all worried because of this reappraisal, and he's so upset, and she gets enough information to understand that, oh, we're in danger. Everything could be revealed when they do the reappraisal the day after the party, when he shows off all of his trinkets and artifacts. The Ghorman front reviews all the data and finds out about the military security required. But it's funny because just as Cyril leaves, we also have Cassian arrive.
Right. They keep missing each other. It happens multiple times.
Missing each other. And he checks into the hotel. It's a beautiful hotel.
It's gorgeous. Yeah.
It's gorgeous.
So he's there, and he immediately starts pushing his valet to share about the massacre. And it's an interesting scene because it goes back to this idea of another character that we don't see again, and we probably won't see again. But they give that character a moment of humanity, and they give them history, and they give them an opinion, like the whole thing with like, my wife doesn't understand why we stay here and stuff like that. So I think it's just another beautiful character moment. And it's also really important for Cassian because, again, he's been so focused on himself and on Bix and that his sort of Snow Queen perspective, that having him take this moment to really empathize with someone else in the galaxy who's affected by this. And so he really, it's this briefest moment of him starting to feel that sense of responsibility for the larger community. But then, of course, he kind of like pings back almost immediately.
Almost immediately.
We
head back to Coruscant with Deidre waiting for Cyril.
Oh my gosh.
Such a weird moment. She's wearing black, her hair is down, so she's like waiting for him. And like he kisses her on the cheek and he's like, I'm finally here. It's like, but you can't stay. Sorry. It's like, how long do I have? An hour. I had you followed. You had me followed? You don't trust me? Like, oh man. That to me is the first indication that he might actually be quite resentful if things turn.
Yeah. Well, I think that he's willing to help her because he believes in the cause. But if she uses him and something horrible happens, I think he's going to have a significant crisis. So we'll see. But it's also like, she also has this moment where she implies that their relationship is, quote, a small thing.
Right.
She says something to the effect of like, oh, it's not worth it for such a small thing.
Yeah.
And it sort of indicates that this is not as big of a deal for her as I think it is for him.
Yeah, it's funny because like they were living together, which is sort of wild. And it was before she needed to sort of use him for this.
Yeah. Well, she makes an interesting reflection of Luthen because
Mm-hmm.
we've already said that Luthen is using people like pawns, and here's
Mm-hmm.
Dedra using basically her lover like a pawn.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think she has some compunction about it because you see kind of hesitation a few different times in this episode specifically. But she's still doing it, and it sounds like it was her choice. It was her decision. It doesn't sound like anyone forced her to do
Yeah,
this.
I think she specifically knew that he could fit in there and
Yeah.
she could use him. Yeah.
Well, his sincerity works in her favor.
Yes.
Like he's a true believer. That works for her. That
Yeah.
helps her. So so then she tells him to turn out the lights
Yeah.
twice. It's like it almost feels like she's terrified of anyone seeing her be vulnerable.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, it's interesting.
And they get it on.
Apparently.
before he heads it back to his mommy's place. We have this brief interaction with Cassian and Enza, and he just immediately calls her on all of her like assumptions and that how uncareful she is, and just absolutely laying down like the rebellion law.
Yeah.
And he's even got like this little like pastry on his like little thing, and he's drinking from his drink. Like we see how much he has even changed. Not that he wasn't always a cool operator, not that he wasn't always able to fit in, but you see him being the Luthen.
Yes.
In this situation.
Right, exactly. Because now he's the one bringing people into the fold of the rebellion and frankly not tolerating their BS. And so he's just immediately like, that is not how things work here. Here's what you need to do. This
I could have been ISB. I could have been a snitch.
Right.
You would have been arrested, all of your friends and family. Like, do you even understand what you're doing? Oh, yeah. And those people following me, they're just drawing attention. Send them home.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So
I know,
he just lays it down.
Way smarter than you.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
which I totally can see would be so off-putting, but this comes from a place of he doesn't actually want to help them. He doesn't actually think that they're worth his time because he is protecting his and Bix's own interests right now. And he doesn't want to spend any more time trying to protect anybody else. He's very Snow Queenie.
Yeah, he does not want to stick his neck out for anyone else right now. So he's not really into it. So
and he's not really willing to give good answers to anything. He's just willing to poke holes in other people's business.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's a great point. He really does. He's here to tell you what you're doing wrong, but he's not going to offer a solution.
Yeah, he's not going to lead you because he's not ready to be a leader.
Yep.
Oh, we're around the breakfast table again. And
oh my gosh, we have the cereal again.
The cereal. I bet you they couldn't get the cereal because they never show it. They never show the cereal, but they specifically, it came from like a specific like Captain Crunch brand that they got the cereal from. They should have bought like 16,000 boxes.
They needed to buy more.
But he hands her the spider and she jokes about naming him Cyril because he's a spider and he's broody and it's more than I'll see of you. And it's like such a good scene. It's not quite as painful as when he first returned to Coruscant and he was eating his cereal and she was just laying into him. This one is more like teasing because like, even though he's not a failure right now, he's just not where she wants him to be.
Yeah. One thing I struggle with in all of these episodes is I can't tell what's just a fun character moment and what's actually going to pay off into something larger.
Right.
So all of the stuff with his mom, I don't know if it's just, haha, this character has a really annoying and very recognizable mother. And how much of it is like, what if, he's in danger? Is she going to stand up for him or hide something for him or vice versa? Like, I do wonder how much they're laying the groundwork for stuff like that, but they could also just leave it and never do anything with it. So I can't really tell.
Well, she was always willing to do stuff for him if he asked for help. And so I don't know. It's hard to tell. I do think that's a really good point, though.
Yeah. So we'll see. We'll see what they do. So then from this very recognizable domestic scene, we go to another very somewhat recognizable scene, which is Biggs, who has Good Morning Coruscant on in the background where they're talking about the upcoming Senate investiture and all the related galas and how all of, the who's who is going to be there and what they're going to be wearing and all this other stuff. And you see that she's been sleeping on a mattress on the living room floor with a blaster.
Yeah.
So she is not doing well.
No, she's not doing well. Can we talk about Good Morning Coruscant for a moment?
Yeah.
So it totally reminded me of the Hunger Games, but then
yes,
Rachel from Scavenger's Horde messaged out on Blue Sky that, okay, we're all accepting that Gormanda from the Star Wars Holiday Special is a cooking segment on Good Morning Coruscant, right? Because they do look similar, like the over makeup, the hair, the dresses. Like Gormanda looks like she's from there. I love this headcanon that is actually a Good Morning Coruscant like show.
I love it.
On the same channel.
I'm so here for that.
But it is very Hunger Games. Like it is very extreme. It is very, in Hollywood, people would overdress for performances during that period of time. Like more makeup, more dress, etc. It was in black and white, so they almost had to, but it was it just really reminded me of the media of the time. And haven't I been saying this whole time I want to see more of the HoloNet?
Yeah. Right. And there
we got to see TV. We got to see a holo screen.
I know.
Show. I was so excited. Anyways,
it was really good, and it did such a good job of helping set up everything that's happening later.
But they do talk about how this is investiture, which falls on Empire Day, which means
of course it does.
The Imperial Ball, which is a big thing, which also means the next night, tomorrow, is Ezra's birthday. And 2 days after that is Leia and Luke's birthday. Happy sweet 16, guys.
Well, no, it's after that now, right? Because
it's 3 BBY.
Oh, you're right. You're right. Sweet 16. Solid point. Yep.
Happy 16th birthday, you three. You crazy kids.
Yes. The Skywalkers and the spare.
And the Bridger.
Yeah. Too funny.
Don't get into too much trouble.
I know, right? Oh my God. So Cassian finds the House of Rylance. He offers them a custom code crystal to kind of win their trust. And they start to share a little bit about, hey, we have this inside source. And of course, he's immediately suspicious.
Yes.
This is where, again, the fact that they have him and Cyril specifically miss each other, that's all very deliberate, because obviously Cassian would have shut this whole thing down if he had realized that it was Cyril, but he doesn't know. And so he's just like, oh, you have somebody? Are you sure you can trust them? This is what they do. They feed you false information. So he's very skeptical, but they're totally certain that they've got this right. And he
even tries to smoothly show them at the end of the conversation, like how to be a better spy. Like, I'm send me over some swatches or contact me at the hotel. It would be nice to see Palmo at night. Like, he's just so smooth. Like, he's learned a lot from Luthen.
Yeah, he definitely has a lot. So, yep, he sees what's happening. And then, oh my gosh, we're back to puppy dog Cyril.
Wait.
Oh, wait,
Did you see the last shot of that? Like
with the spider,
with the spider in the crystal,
that was so cool.
Because it's very much like the Ghorman are merrily making their plans and their webs and their schemes.
They're spinning,
but they do not see the invisible glass that has them penned in. And then we immediately cut to the ISB and the conversation that Cyril and
puppy dog Cyril
having.
Because he's so excited.
Oh my God! I even wrote down he's now just some sort of pet.
Yes. He needs to calm down. He's so stoked. And Dedra's trying to like rein him in as much as she can. And he's just fighting her. It's so funny. But Yeah, so he's sharing his intel. Dedra's trying to be cautious. And the whole intent is they want to allow the Ghorman Front a win so that they will grow bolder. Because again, their whole point, what she told Krennic from the beginning was you need an insurgency you can count on to do the wrong thing. And the only way they're going to get them there, to get them past this kind of timidity that they have, is to give them a victory. So they're trying to reel them in so that they can have a reasonable win against the Empire, and then that sets them up to try something bigger and justify the big crackdown that they want to do.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, Partaz actually says like calibrate retribution carefully, or they use the word calibrate a lot in this. In this 3-episode arc, calibrate.
You're right. Another thing I noticed is the way that they're standing in this scene. So you have Dedra, Cyril, and Partagaz. They're actually in a triangle. They're triangulating the rebels.
Yeah,
so
in the circle,
was cool too. Right,
they're inside of the circle in a triangle. Oh yeah.
That was cool.
And Cyril's like, this is the greatest day of my life.
And Dedra looks like she might like burst his bubble, but then she just settles for, "Oh, it's good to see you happy." And it's hard to tell how sincere she may or may not be with that comment.
It is hard to tell. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't
know. Tough call.
Yeah, it is.
Yep. Back to Dakar.
And the plot thickens as we see as Wilmon looks on to Pooty and Saw plotting his demise. But Pooty manages to get Saw to commit to one target so that he can focus on learning that.
Or so we think.
Little do we know.
But the fact that even though he couldn't hear what they were saying, the fact that the scene was very much kind of shot as if from Will's perspective, I thought was very interesting.
Yeah.
Because of the idea that he knows to be cautious. He knows to be careful. He suspects what they're talking about, even though he's not hearing it. So... But they discuss whether or not, are we going to kill the kid because we don't need him anymore and he's seen too much. And ultimately, of course, they, Saw chooses to hang on to him. And we see the way that plays out later.
Yeah, we only have this brief we have like sort of the Clea and Luthen like confrontation about the
Yeah, they yell at each other.
They have this fight about what they're collecting and whether it's valuable, and that there's too much and they're collecting too much. Again, back to it's all too much.
And they're blaming each other.
And she's like,
no, it's your fault.
There's just bits and pieces, right? So they have this full blown out thing in the midst of Cassian sort of reviewing the transport, reviewing the plan, reviewing it. And Cassian being kind of judgmental about everything because he's not really willing to take risks for somebody else's skin. Right. He doesn't want to take risks.
Yep.
He's trying to protect himself, and he doesn't feel like they're in it and they're not going to be willing to protect him either.
Right. Exactly.
So they have the plan, Clea and Luthen, to go to the party. And then we head to Saw, who right off the bat is like, comes up and is like, "Are we ready to go, boy? Like, you, boy. Do you know if he's ready to go?" And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. And Saw pulls the blaster on him and is like, "No, I need an answer, yes or no." And Will basically will not commit to saying that the other guy can handle it. And it looks like Saw is going to shoot him, and then he
kills the other guy. Yeah.
Yep. And says that he's actually a traitor who was drawing them into a trap, and reveals a recording device. And so ultimately what happened is he uncovered a traitor, but he also chose Will.
Yeah. He chose
to join
Will.
his group.
Yeah. And he's now going to invest more time and effort into Will because he is a skilled engineer who knows what he's doing, and he can hook him up with that sweet rhydonium.
That's right. Yep.
So yeah, Cassian sort of gives him his assessment. This is where this almost ends, right? Like, so Cassian gives the Ghorman Front like you're about to hijack a carrier and like live in the crime scene. Like,
and
that's also
not how this works.
Tell everybody what you've done. Like, that's not how stealing and getting away with it, how to get away with stealing and rebellion works. Like, so they're pissed at him because they're like, we want to do something. We're eager to do something. Why aren't you saying yes, Dad? And he's like, nah.
Yeah, well, and they say specifically, not much of a revolutionary, are you? And specifically really then, like, oh, tell your friend that we're not impressed. And so it's like, they just hit him on multiple levels. And it's interesting because he doesn't really react. He doesn't seem that bothered that they're so unhappy. So he doesn't really feel a sense of responsibility toward them at all. And it also makes sense why it leads them to be almost kind of desperate after this, because he was supposed to help them and he didn't. And so it really starts to, you can feel, and of course this is emphasized by the immediately following scene with Saw, where he talks about this concept, but you feel the pressure building on the Ghorman front, because they want so badly to do something. They know they need help. And so as that pressure builds, they potentially become more and more reckless. Yeah.
And I have a theory based on the next scene about something you said earlier. So I do want to call this out, but we cut to the Rhydonium theft with Saw and Will. And they kind of go in solo, and it's just the two of them. They're having this conversation, and we're almost getting like a Saw Gerrera Clone Wars recap.
Yep.
Which is like sort of wild to me to hear this happening in this show. But it's really well done. It feels like what you would tell somebody you barely know about your past.
Right. Well, because he leaves out details that you do know if you've seen Clone Wars. And so the really poignant one to me is when he refers to the Rhydonium itself as his sister.
Yeah, I was like, what, steal his chopped liver to you?
I know. Well, but it's deliberate, right?
Yeah, she understands me. Yeah.
Yeah, this is, and it's so sad, because he's fascinated by this fuel, which is also poison. And he says, I understand it. She's my sister and she loves me. That itch, that burn, you feel how badly she wants to explode. So he's talking about how everyone else is so cautious. And he, like the Rhydonium, is not. He will explode at a moment's notice.
And he's also talking about like that taste of the rebellion that you need to get to actually have the power to fuel the revolution and the rebellion.
Right.
And this ties to, he actually says, like, we first sensed it when we felt our skin. It felt like our skin was coming alive. And so it's that touch is like sight, right? Like, and also touch it kind of ties to that idea that like, sometimes you have to trust your feelings, what you feel might be better than what your eyes can betray you, right? So you kind of have to go with your feelings.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, what you feel.
Plug here for our blindness episode. Please go listen.
But he wins over Will, and Will takes off the mask, which is that masks represent protection. Right?
Yes.
Protection. He is protecting himself within the rebellion. He was going to go home on his schedule. He was only going to do what Luthen asked him to do. But no, he is no longer protected. And now he is in. He has jumped into the deep end. He is in. And now he can feel the, the power and the fuel to drive the revolution with.
Yeah. Revolution is not for the sane. We'll all be dead before the Republic is back. And yet here we are. You're right here and you're ready to fight. And then we're the Rhydo kid. We're the fuel. We're the thing that explodes when there's too much friction in the air. So it's just, again, we know that this is the writer that gives us the amazing speeches. Yes. And this is a great one.
This is a great speech.
It's so well done. And he
had watched those Clone Wars episodes. Absolutely. He did.
Well, I mean, listen, already we've seen stuff from Clone Wars, stuff from the sequel trilogy. There's so much love for Star Wars in its entirety here. And that is so refreshing because I do feel like there's so much of like my Star Wars, your Star Wars. This is the only part that I care about or like, and therefore, I'll have continuity here, but not there. And I do appreciate that, Tony and his team, they do seem to be quite genuine about like, no, this could be for all fans because we're going to pull in pieces from all of these different stories that you will recognize and love. So that's really exciting to me. But I also just think this whole idea of, Luthen and Clea and Cassian and the Ghorman folks and everybody else, everyone is so cautious. Everyone is so hesitant. And Saw understands that he and a person like him is necessary for the success of the rebellion, the spark, if you will.
Yeah.
It's important because you need that person who's gonna be reckless in order to make progress and to inspire other people to action. And so that's what he does. And of course, he then transforms Will into that as well.
Yep, exactly.
So
that wraps us up.
Say that Will becomes a hero in this scene, maybe?
I would say so. I was actually going to say, like, archetypically, he is choosing to leave the sort of Luthen structure, and he is, embracing. It's dark. He is embracing this like new perspective, and Rhydonium actually does equal death. So he has experienced a death and rebirth.
Yeah, exactly. Because and it's interesting because then by the time you get to Rogue One, the constant exposure to Rhydonium has really destroyed Saul Guerrero's body, and he's not in good shape.
He is not in good shape. No, it's definitely a sacrifice that he was willing to make for that sweet, sweet Rhydonium smell. Yeah. Oh man. But this is interesting that we did. This is, to me, was one of the best moments of this 3-episode arc.
Agreed.
Because it is powerful, and we see that transformational moment for Will.
Yep. Yeah.
And I do get the impression that he wants him to be his own person in this too. Which,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It was nice.
So let's move on to episode 6. What a festive evening. We start out at Port Steergard, which we've only heard about.
Yeah, it's the first time we see it. It was kind of fun.
So it's a naval yard. They create ships, etc. And that's where Cassian is meeting Luthen's ship, his cool ship. What an awkward flight home.
Yeah. Well, but I like the way that it mirrors scenes from season 1. I thought that was really smart to kind of it shows the progression of their relationship. Or in some cases, not the progression.
I mean, he sort of tries to act like a proud dad, like, "Hey, what was your name?"
He did,
You did, kiddo. Like, look at you. What was your name? You look cool. I can't believe that you're actually like kind of like me right now. Like, you leveled up. How did it go? And he's like, they're not ready. And he's like, yeah, I heard it didn't go very well. And he kind of flips a little bit to being kind
defensive.
of defensive and impatient. I thought you were ready, kind of. But it really comes down to, he needs him to think like a leader, right? Like, he needs him to use all of the resources that he has to be able to win the battle. And this really is calling out that he is unwilling to do so. Cassian is unwilling to do so at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that what he's getting at here is that being a leader means you can't only ever do the sure thing. You have to take risks. And to him, he acknowledges that Ghorman is a risk, but his point is that the payoff is potentially worth it.
Yeah.
And he's saying, so he sees the strategic value of Ghorman in spite of the risks. And
there is a chance that it will go up in flames, like the blood and or like the hurt, or like the Rhydonium sort of theme that we have going on here, that you have to kind of potentially sacrifice something or take a risk.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he says that, because Cassian is not willing to take the risk, as we've seen. And so he says, if it goes up in flames, and Luthen says, well, it'll burn very brightly.
Yep.
And it does show again how Luthen he is so utilitarian. He only views everyone as pawns, even the Ghorman front. Like, he's not really concerned about whether they
survive this.
Yeah. He's just like, nope, having Ghorman stand up, no matter how it plays out, is worth it. That's basically what he's saying. And I like this. I like the complexity of it because he's not wrong. It's not wrong to value people's lives, and it's not wrong to view it in the context of the larger struggle and what it can mean for the rest of the galaxy. So I do really like that there isn't really a clean answer to this question. It's just different perspectives and different phases of life. They're different archetypes, You have Cassian of being more careful because he has something to lose. And then you have Luthen, who it's not so much that he has nothing to lose as much as this is his role, is to take that big picture view. That's what the king does.
That's what the king does.
His job is to look at the whole kingdom. And so that's what he's doing. So it's a good scene.
We have Luthen talk to Clea about this piece isn't what we needed. We need a new one, and it's being delivered as we speak. I love their speak, and I love the cover of him being this like artifact seller, purveyor. Because it covers everything that they need, and so being delivered as we speak is Val.
Yep.
We hear the code, which is visiting friends. Why? Curious by nature. I have friends everywhere. And he takes the bag that she has. Cassian returns home, and Bix doesn't answer right away, which causes him to have worry. But she's cleaned her house up. Yep.
Yeah. She made the house more homey, and they smooch a lot.
They do smooch a lot. But then it leads into Cassian, like, and her, like, saying, like, oh, Luthen came by. That was so annoying. And Cassian loses his ever-loving God. Like,
it's true.
Like, he loses it.
Yeah, he completely freaks out.
And he's paranoid, and he's like, why is he doing this? And I would say, like, this is him shifting archetypes if it would have gone further than this, but, like, him going to be an aggressive version of his protective self.
Which is the sorceress. The sorceress is the aggressive queen archetype.
Yeah.
If he had, he kind of lashes out at Luthen later, but then he backs off. So I don't think he was Snow Queenie,
but
agreed.
He just like, he gets very, very scared for her. For what Luthen is trying to do, tear them apart. Like, nobody really trusts Luthen because they all know that Luthen cares about the rebellion more than any individual person.
Yep. Yeah. It reminded me a lot, actually, of Anakin and Padme. Like him, the way that he behaved after his nightmare of her. He just kind of, I would say Cassian showed more panic, but the same thing is true of, like, it becomes this obsession of, I can't let anything happen to her, and I will burn everything down if I have to avoid it. Right. And so it's just being completely driven by fear. So very much that. Bix, to her credit, looks like she's getting really tired of being treated as delicate. I don't think she's into it. And at the same time, she doesn't push back as hard as I wish she would.
Yeah.
Like, I really wish she had kind of told him that he was out of line and he needed to back off. And she didn't really. She kind of just accepts that he's, her protector. And I don't love that.
Yeah. But to the character, like, this is the first time she doesn't look overly tired.
Right.
Like, maybe she got a full night's sleep after cleaning her entire house. Who hasn't?
Yeah, maybe.
Been there. All right. We move on to Perrin and Mon, who seem to be getting along in the car. I don't know. Maybe we're just not spending enough time with them, but she's very like empathetic to like all of the work that he has to do for her.
Yeah. Well, he's a very savvy social events planner. And it's interesting because you really get the impression, in the previous season, him being sort of the party guy was seen as this, oh, he's flighty. He doesn't care about anything. He's just in it for the,
They've definitely mixed it up and made him like lens wise from the lens of us as the viewers. He is much more of a empathetic and person that we want to see on screen.
But also you do start to get that his social prowess is an aspect of his political savvy. Like his role in Mon's life is to grease the skids for her socially. Yep. Like that's his job because that's not her forte, right?
Nope,
she's kind of a legislative fighter. And so the fact that he's like, well, I'm the party guy, so my job is to make sure that you move easily in any room you're in. And that's what he does.
Yeah, he does. And he gets her in those rooms too.
Right,
Even though she's like, I keep on asking, like, why hasn't she been arrested? Like thinking to myself, or come into an accident. And it's entirely because he is like, oh, that's just, my firebrand wife. But I'm here, like he's doing his job to keep her out of trouble. I think.
You see it later when they get into the scene with them and Krennic, like she's like basically picking a fight with him. And Perrin a couple of times steps in and is like, yeah, let's change the subject now, So
exactly.
So definitely, but this scene with them in the car it's almost kind of cute because he's so stressed. She's like, oh, honey, you're doing so much work. And he says it's tough squeezing a whole year's worth of insincerity into 3 nights. And she was removing the chains, the collar thing that she wears. And she says, which indicates that she's sort of letting down her guard with him and she's being a little more authentic. And she says, you'll figure it out. So it's like she's really expressing faith in him that she knows this is what he does well and he's going to work it out. I also want to mention
sitting like really close to her. I don't know.
He is.
The framing, they're cuddling up. They're cuddling up and it's great.
It's good.
But we see a change in even them talking about the past. Remember when you came to the Senate, there was like, you waited years before you actually had your first like diplomatic party but there's
banquet.
80 senators that are having investiture parties and banquets. Like how what are we doing? And we have to put Skulldun last. That's where we're gonna finish out the night because he's now family. And there's this like little moment that I do not want to forget about when they get to Skulldun's party that I just want to call out to.
Okay.
I'll say it now because I might forget later. But they come in and Skulldun says, "Oh, you must see the children. They've just returned before you leave tonight." It's like we don't see them. They're kept aside somewhere. Right?
I don't think he means that they're there that night. I think he just says,
but they've just returned
since they got back. Yeah.
Yeah, they've just returned. You must, before you leave, you must see the children. He says that.
Oh, I don't know. I don't remember him saying that, but I believe you.
It's weird. And I was like, well, I guess Lita's like just there.
Yeah, doing her thing. I don't know. I guess we'll see. But I did like, when he specifically says, years worth of insincerity into 3 nights. So the 3 nights to me made me think of like in the original Cinderella, it's 3 balls.
It's 3 balls, yeah.
And it's the last one where her sort of identity is revealed, basically, effectively, as far as how the shoe works and everything. So this idea that everything comes to a head at the final party is definitely, fits really well into that framework. So it's good stuff. I like it. So Cassian shows up at the gallery unannounced.
Yeah.
And as Luthen is going to let him in, he passes by these like clawed gauntlets, and there's probably somebody who knows what these are from. I don't, unfortunately. Sorry, guys. But I did like the overall idea of like, you're like, oh, they're gonna duke it out,
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Like we're gonna have it out. It's gonna be a fight. And it is. Cassian like busts in. Luthen's pissed at him because he's not paying attention to any of their security protocols and he's way out of line, and they're really fighting, and they're fighting over the fact that Cassian feels not just protective, but possessive about Bix.
Yeah.
Like, how dare you come see her when I'm not there? Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's not a way I really like seeing Cassian.
No, he's in a bad way. He's in a negative archetype. We know that. We can see how he's being, and it's not great. Yeah. And like, negative archetypes are not less necessarily good or bad. It just kind of means that you're not in a growth archetype. You're not in a positive change archetype. And you're kind of stuck in your own underworld of your own making. You're not really willing to grow and change.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, as much as we love Bix and Cassian together, they were not in a good place together. She was depressed and on drugs, and he was in this like protective, like possessive place where he was sort of encouraging her to be stuck.
Yeah.
Place.
Neither of them are growing while they're together. And so we'll talk about this a little later, but I do believe that both characters will need separation of some kind in order to grow. I do not believe that they are, they're ready to transform as characters as long as they are together, which is sad. And that's kind of a point that's made here as well. And then again later with Vel and Cinta, which is this idea of, well, we want to be part of a relationship. We want to be in community. Cassian says, I wanted to be part of something. And this idea that they crave that connection, but it also prevents them from taking that more community level view that Luthen takes. Yeah. So that's why Luthen really, when he went to Bix, he was almost kind of testing her and Cassian to see if they could make decisions on their own purely based on loyalty to the cause and not to each other.
Yeah. And they're not
at this point, they don't do that. No.
Yeah. I wrote down, it was a test.
It was a test and they failed. And so then there's the whole, you want my blood? And so we talked about this before, that there is a price to be paid of some kind in order to be truly part of the rebellion. Yeah.
And those that are actually committed are willing to pay the blood price in a way. Yeah.
Yep.
And this is the lesson that Clea painfully shows Lottie later.
Yep.
We're back at the ISB, and Dr. Gorsh's plan is expanding under Admiral Yularin's agreement with the Emperor. And I loved Hertz, like his answer. It's an honor. It's like, calibrate your enthusiasm.
Yes. Yeah. Like he overdoes it on his enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Partagas is like, dude, calm down.
Calm down. This is not that exciting. And Lonnie is totally willing to I'll use you as a shield. It's great.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, you read the brief and then tell me what it says. So it's great because it's like he's always able to kind of have that shield, have an extra person in the way so that it never really leads back to him. Leaks will not start with him.
No, and people wouldn't necessarily assume that he was the person who was maybe the leaker. Yeah, he's protecting himself quite well, which is great. We have Val and Cinta. Val is waiting there in the yin-yang window as she approaches, and we see her through the window, which shows the separation of the two of them.
It's so painful.
Cinta cut her hair, which has meaning. She's changed.
Yeah.
My space lesbians, I love you.
We love them.
And she also uses the line from oh goodness, what is the line from? But I'll have what she's having is from
When Harry Met Sally.
When Harry Met Sally. I'll have what she's having.
That was funny. I liked that. Yeah, but the whole scene is just like, it's so sad because you start to get hints of what happened. The fact that she must have had some kind of injury and it took her a long time to recuperate. And she asked Luthen not to tell Vel. And eventually she had enough time to think about it that she started to regret that. And so get a lot of
she says she'll tell her one day. And I'm like, no, you won't. I was mad at my rewatch. I was just mad about this because It's hard. I know what we're getting with this show, and it's still hard. And I'm not happy about burying our gays. Like, I'm really not. Like, I'm not.
No. I'm not pleased that they did this. And it goes back to kind of similar to the situation with Bix. It's not that I have a problem with it as a plot point in general, but you do have to approach these topics with such care and such awareness of the culture and the media environment that you're doing this. And so I again think that this was done as like a pretty standard barrier gaze, and that sucks for these characters because we love them very much.
Yeah. And it was also a woman of color too, which is rare. And what? No.
Yeah. It reminded me of what is it, Val from Solo?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it reminded me of her. Like it's just disappointing. It was just disappointing that's what they did.
Yep.
Yeah.
We do get that Deirdre Partax, like, Cyril can never know what is really going on here. For security. But the thing is about this is that there's consequences to hiding secrets from people you care about. And even if she is just using him, it might come back to bite her.
Right. And this goes back to this question of she is so resistant to vulnerability. And so just, I don't need family. I don't need people that I care about and who care about me. You know, she treats this so much. She treats the relationship so much like just something she does for her own gratification and no other reason. And it's unclear at the moment how deep in she will be by the time the shit hits the fan.
Yeah. And what's going to happen, right? Because she might be in full denial about her place in this and what she's done and all of that. I don't know. But she keeps herself fairly arm's length from everything. Everything she receives is through communications or through Cyril. She's not on the ground. She's not doing the things. So she has this dispassionate lens towards what's happening on Ghorman.
Right. Yeah.
Speaking of Ghorman, baby's first rebellion.
Yes.
Vel and Cinta, the organization, the orders, they're going through all of the different things. And they're like, you gotta listen. You gotta have a maintained military structure, or at least an order of how you're going to operate. And people have to listen to orders and follow them. They say it so many times. And it just reminds me of what ends up happening with the rebellion is that they end up having a militarized structure because they need to be able to be more organized or they fall apart. Like Cassian is Captain Andor in Rogue One. He has a military designation.
Yeah. And this is true of insurgencies, revolutions, etc. throughout history. Is often the ones that succeed are the ones that are able to get organized. Famously in the US, we have the revolutionaries, the patriots, likely would not have succeeded without the assistance of the French, who showed up and trained them
and turned them into an actual military with actual ranks.
Right. And gave them the military discipline that they needed because they weren't winning the battles that they were fighting like these little independent militias. They weren't. They were failing miserably, and things did not turn around until they got that military discipline. And so I think this is what's very clearly demonstrated here. And what's tragic about it, of course, is that on the one hand, it is something that is definitely needed and that we know that the rebellion does get to at a later point in time. And on the other hand, it sets us up for, that one failure that has such a horrible cost.
Exactly. And during this meeting, they focus on two people. They focus on the boy, who I cannot figure out his name, and the girl, Drina. And they're more worried about the girl.
Yeah.
In fact, like they move her post and everything like that. Like they change her from being the driver to being up top with them so that they can watch her. And actually, she ends up leaving her post.
Yeah.
Like,
she does it to guide this like old
lady
woman away.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it had a purpose, but it also is, no, you got to follow orders. Like, she should have found another way, in a way. And the boy who totally ignores the first rule they have. When you join the rebellion, you don't carry a blaster unless we tell you to. And you know what? Do not carry a blaster. No one else.
Yep, that's right. Cinta and Vel have the blasters. Nobody else does.
Yeah. And they end up having a last night together, which has a lot of kisses and intimacy and an agreement, which felt a lot like, hey, we're going to retire tomorrow.
It was retire. I think it was more just, we're not going to let Luthen keep us apart.
It felt like the I'm one day from retirement speech that they often get in like cop dramas or Lethal Weapon movies, I'm one day from retirement, or we're one heist, one mission away from having Luthen keep us apart any longer. And so I was like, oh no.
Yeah, they're doomed. It was rough because we're worth more to Luthen separately than together. That's something we'll have to talk to him about. Yeah. And it's so painful because especially now that we have a better understanding of why they've been separated for as long as they have.
It's a communication problem.
Yeah, and we also know that this does actually represent a transformation for Cinta specifically, because she always said, hey, the cause comes first, we take what's left. And by the time we reach this scene where they're having this conversation, it's very clear that she has changed her mind.
Yeah. And we can tell the difference between this moment where she's obviously like, I'm willing to be a family with you. I'm willing to connect with you. And the intimacy of this moment is powerful versus what we get with Cassian and Bix, which is like, we're an old married couple now, and you're always worried I'm going to die. So, it's just different levels of power in the storytelling because the characters are committing to things versus reaffirming.
But it's also just, you've gotten to see their relationship develop, right?
Yeah.
You've got to see them
and the struggle, which is always fun.
Right.
Yeah.
We see them together, we see them separated, we see them coming back together and how they've changed in the interim. And so it makes their actual union in this scene very beautiful. And it was, to me, actually, it was easily the most emotional part of the entire 3-episode arc, was this scene, because it was earned. They gave us most of this story on screen. So you got to really feel all of it. And it was a tragedy. And I hate that because every love story in Star Wars is a tragedy, and I'm sick of it. But it was still beautifully done, at least in terms of providing us the emotional payoff.
Yeah, exactly. Back to Mon in the Senate, and they're all doing the Senate pledge, which, this is bad. Gross. For peace and prosperity for all, a galaxy assembled, an empire. Man.
And she can't do it. She doesn't do it. She won't finish the oath, and she walks out the second it's done.
She's like, fine, I'll just head to all my parties I gotta go to.
Yeah.
It feels like it's like the start of a new session or the investiture, and they're doing their pledge that they do.
That's what it is. Yep.
But Luthen and Clay are prepping for their party nights. Perrin and Mon finally get to Skulden's party, and they run into Bail, who is
recast Bail.
The recast Bail. I'm not mad. I like Benjamin Bratt. I like him.
I think he did fine. And I mean, the scene doesn't have a lot of purpose other than to signal to the audience that the character's been recast. That's the main purpose of the scene.
Yeah.
Because he's going to show up in the next.
And to show that Mon and him are familiar with each other, which
we know, but
yeah, it's important in that way. But the parties, both parties, the heist and the party at Skulden's are starting, and so Cyril is watching the the Ghorman front and sort of narrating his way through what is happening with the heist of the military transport. And we also have the party itself. And there's delicious stuff that happens throughout this party.
Oh, yeah.
It actually almost is like an entire half of the episode.
Yeah.
It like we have Luthen being like schmoozy and like, I thought you guys would try and steal it from me or buy it from me. His ring finger, his finger, and we have the ISB agents that are there.
Yes. Oh my God, they're so funny.
And they're funny. We have Mon and Luthen connect. But what's going on? And Mon is like, how's my cousin doing? I haven't heard from her.
Yeah. And this is another one that it continues to signal sort of Luthen's blind spot, which is that he, again, he's so focused on everyone's role in
he forgets
the rebellion,
that there's connections.
That there's people. So
and
when she says, I want to talk to her, he's like, oh, is there something urgent that she needs to know? And Mon turns to him and goes, yes, I care about her.
Yeah. It's like, hey, dummy.
Yeah.
Like remember
exactly
the reason we're all in this? Like, come on. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because you have a cold ass relationship with your second in command does not mean the rest of us do.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And then we get into definitely one of my favorite parts of this episode, which is Clea dragging poor Lonnie in as cover so that she can remove the bug. And it is so funny because he's just like in a complete panic and she's just threatening him.
Yeah, she's like, you're going to do this and you're going to a little to the right, little to the left. Oh, yeah. But I love the Tinian Codex. I love it.
I love it too. It was a really good one.
And she touches it. And she's like, I'm going to explain what this is because you might be tested later. And it's great.
We have surprise guest Krennic.
Krennic, and Mon picks a fight with him. And they're like fighting the whole time. And she's like, what do you? Yeah. And he's using like it's like talking points from fascist propaganda.
Exactly.
We talked about this. Yep. And like, she's like, no, like, this is not the truth. We've all been at parties like that, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, especially in her case where he says that he's been in front of her committee a number of times. And she's like, oh, it's so nice to see you off the witness stand or whatever. Like, basically, she's always dragging him in front of an investigation for his actions. And he's always getting off scot-free, so she's pissed about it. And it's a really interesting back and forth. I really enjoy how the other characters all get really uncomfortable and parents trying to sort of keep the peace.
And it's mostly in the background as we're focused on Clea and what she's trying to do, which she uses this sort of pin that's over her heart or over her chest to unlock the listening device, but it's stuck and it digs into her hand and we see the blood sort of well, and her effort is really hard. And so she actually has to ask Lonnie for help to stabilize the codex while she's trying to twist it and get enough leverage.
Right. But the fact that she took this brooch off of her over her heart and then it draws blood, it basically indicates that's her heart's blood.
Yeah. And she's willing to give her life for what she believes in. That's what that's saying. That's the symbolism, guys.
It is. There it is. What's happening? What's happening?
Because blood is weird. It often represents binaries. We have a lot of binaries in this episode already, but blood itself often represents life and death.
Yes.
And so the willingness to die or live for the rebellion.
Yep. Yeah. Definitely. So briefly, I want to cut back to what's happening
the Gore heist.
Ghorman. So a few things. Firstly, we get a look at their escape route, which of course is a watery tunnel. Friendly reminder, watery tunnels are pretty much always birth canals. So
yeah, I was like, oh yeah, they're transforming into a rebellion. Right. Oh yeah.
Exactly.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Like I wrote that down. but yeah, it is that, right? So they're efficiently changing to that they themselves as a group are changing.
Right, exactly. So that's there, and then they are able to disable the transport. They start unloading the weapons. Vel reminds them not to rush. Again, the whole issue that the Ghorman has been having the whole time is that they are always in a hurry. They're always rushing, and so she's still there trying to remind them, "Hey, slow down. You'll get it faster if you don't rush." And of course, Cyril is just narrating all of this back to Dedra and Partagaz.
Did this heist not remind you of a baby version of the heist that was on Aldani?
Oh, absolutely. Which is why it's so funny because, Cassian, Vel, and Cinta all approach this with like the old veteran attitude. And you youngins don't know what you're doing.
Don't know.
Exactly. Which, of course, conveniently ignores the fact that a lot of that one blew up in their face and they lost like half their team and all of that kind of stuff.
They lost more than half their team.
Yeah, it did not go well for them, but we'll just conveniently ignore
But they got away with a lot of money.
They did get away with a lot of money. So there you go. Win-win. Yeah. But yeah, so it's very interesting as that. Then we get back into excuse me, we get back into the, what's happening in the gallery. It's getting very, very tense. The argument between Mon and Krennic turns to this historic massacre. And Krennic is framing that as, oh, well, they were just foolish, lying criminals getting what they deserve. And of course, Mon is saying, oh, you're characterizing people by their response to oppression. And Krennic says, oh, so you mean like my rebel is your terrorist, which is kind of a direct quote of the line, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter, which is definitely it's a very controversial statement, of course, because a lot of times it is used to excuse violent action that is considered terrorism by many people. And so it's a question of, but then on the flip side, you end up with the question of, well, how long are oppressed people supposed to tolerate their oppression without some kind of response? So it is a very old argument that they have, but of course, Krennic's attitude toward it isn't just everything in favor of power and domination, and that's just his whole shtick. And so then we get back to the heist where Lizine shows up. He wants
first Drina leads the old woman away.
Right.
At the same time as Lizine shows up and he's like, I want in. I want to know what's going on. I'm a nosy neighbor. Because he was not part of the revolution. He was just a loudmouth in the town hall.
Right. Exactly.
But we know him, right? And but he confronts the boy. He calls him boy. Does he ever get a name? Please tell me, audience listeners, tell me if this kid that's been throughout all of these 3 episodes ever gets a name and is now eternally haunted by Vel's words. But yeah, he pulls the gun on him and to be like, back off, old man. Yeah. I'm a big boy. I've got a toy. And he calls it a toy. And and they get into a confrontation and it goes off. Yeah. Yeah. And I was like, oh God.
I actually didn't realize what had happened. It took until Vel realizes it for me to realize. I did not. So it was like, and I knew it was a possibility, but I just, for some reason, it was just still a real shock to me. I think that I was probably as surprised by the fact that they had it be friendly fire as I think the characters were. And so, because it just makes it extra tragic, extra heartbreaking.
It does, yeah. Like an accident, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. And after everything, so I do want to mention something briefly. So both Brasso and Cinta had very quick deaths where
they were off screen.
Yeah, they're off screen, but also just like by the time their loved one gets to them, they're already gone. Yeah. And that I think is very interesting just because, tearful goodbyes are always a big thing. Typically in these types of shows. And the fact that they don't do that, I feel like really it leans more into, hey guys, this is war.
Yeah, it shrinks the catharsis.
Right, exactly. And it's just, it has, having it happen so sudden, and there is, to your point, no catharsis, I think is very important for these characters and for the story they're telling, because they don't actually do that in Rogue One. In Rogue One, for example,
there's no time.
No, well, Jyn gets to say goodbye to her father, right? And stuff like that. So,
oh yeah, no, you're right. There was, I mean, and it's a movie. It's like,
yeah,
the time of one of these 3 episode arcs.
Yeah, right. So they do actually go more into, it's not as sudden in Rogue One. It does get a little more emotional payoff, but they purposely withhold that from us in these episodes, and I think that's intentional, in order to make sure that you just understand fully the cost of war, which is that it doesn't always wrap up nicely. Sometimes it's just so sudden, and so that's what happens. And it is heartbreaking. I think that it's amazingly acted. I think the actress playing Vel is just fantastic.
No, she does amazing. And then her speech after,
so good.
Is so good.
Yeah, it's so well done, and it's so sad. I also think it's interesting that Lizine carries Cinta away.
Faye Marseille.
Yeah, that's it. She's amazing in this. But like, Lizine carries Cinta away, which I thought was so interesting, because it's partially his fault, not entirely, but partially his fault. But he immediately is like, I can carry her. I've got this. And I thought that was a really beautiful moment of, again,
like, it's handled well, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they ignored the historical problems with using this particular method.
They fridged this character.
Yeah, they did, and it pisses me off.
No, it sucks. I'm not pleased by the way that they did it. So, like, it's, again, I still have mixed feelings about this. I still feel like this is really obviously coming from a masculine perspective again, and that's just getting really tiring.
I mean, all of these episodes, from what I've read, are written and directed by men. So all of them. So yeah, I'm saddened, because it does mean you're going to miss certain things.
Yeah.
In the telling, in the lens, in the feminine gaze. You're not going to get it necessarily, or it takes more work to get there.
Right. Well, it's just, and that's what these things all feel like. They feel like oversights. They feel like, hey, all you had to do was talk to the right person and somebody would have caught this. But you didn't. You had your little insular group, and that was it. And that's just kind of a bummer. But Vel's speech is amazing. And it is, this is on you now. This is like skin. You're taking her with you wherever you go for the rest of your useless life. Yeah. It's so good. It's so, and she speaks from experience. That's what I like about it, is the idea that she carries people with her. Yeah. Because of what she feels responsible for. And so what she's actually doing, even though she's speaking out of pain, she's also almost kind of sharing wisdom in a way. Yeah. So she says, you'll make up for this forever. Yeah. So,
and her loss will be mourned in ways you can't imagine. Is so good.
Yeah. That was just so heartbreaking, because this idea of every loss has people that you don't know who are mourning it in ways that you can't relate to. Yeah. And so that's, I
think that's really part of like what Luthen is missing, is that like people need to be able to spend the time with people that they can while they can, even though they're basically signing up to potentially die for the rebellion.
Yeah. Well,
and it just shows the difference of like where they're at with A New Hope and the camaraderie and the community by that point. And even like, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, like they have a community within the rebellion, and they all care about them, about each other. And they're going to mourn the loss, but they're part of something.
Yeah, they look out for each other. It's really well done. I love it. But then just to kind of get back to what's happening with Clay and everything. So I want to mention that Lonnie played his part when Krennic, finally asked about the Codex. he remembered what Clea had said, and he was able to, get the facts right.
And she taught him a lesson, which is, if you're not in it to do what I'm about to do, what are you doing? And if you're not willing to have my back, what are you doing?
Yeah. She's basically indicating to him that he can't stay on the outside of this anymore. He has to be all in. And so he has to put in he has to pay the same price that she's paying, or be willing to, right? So when she's paying in blood, he might pay in blood too, and he has to be ready for that. So it's really well done. Then as she and Luthen are walking away, he says, "We should have killed Krennic while we were up there." And she laughs, and she's like, "That's the spirit." And this is why I do wonder what's going to happen with Clea and Luthen. Not just Luthen. We think Luthen's going to die, right? But I am wondering if maybe he gives himself up for Clea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I could see him doing that.
I could see that because their relationship is like very core to him, right?
Yes, absolutely.
So she's the one he'd be willing to like die for that would put the rebellion at risk.
Right. And I think that's the key, is that he looks at everyone else.
He's denying it, but he's
exactly.
But he cares about her. Yeah.
He looks at everyone else's relationships and kind of judges them for, putting these people above the cause. But I think that if it came to Clea, he might risk it.
So I have a question for you about this last Dr. Gorsh scene, which, I mean, is very quick. She puts him in the thing. She tortures him the way that he tortured her. It's very turnabout is fair play, right? She's wearing Cassian's jacket.
Oh.
So what does that mean, Missy?
Yes. All right. Okay. So when the lover, especially a husband, places his clothing onto the bride, that is claiming her for himself, bringing her into his world, making her like him. That is what he is doing. So if she's wearing his clothes, it's because he has claimed her.
And now she's part of the rebellion.
She is in the rebellion. Yeah. I do want to also mention, I really like the resolution of the box motif here, which is that as Dr. Gorsh is entering the facility, he is framed by rectangles on all sides. He's boxed in. And then, of course, Bix is waiting for him, closes him in, everything else. And when she leaves, she exits the same way he entered, which is leaving the box that she was trapped in.
Yeah, well, that she was trapped in. Yeah.
He is breaking out of this box she's been contained in this whole time. So I did think that the imagery worked really well in that sense.
I thought you would like that she was wearing his jacket.
Yes, it's so cool. I love it. So that was wonderful. She shoots the guard. And
then Cassian blows up the entire floor.
Yep. Yeah. So it's all gone now. So how do we feel about this particular turn for Bix?
I mean, I still think that this means she is turned into a vixen and not necessarily a damsel, but more transformation could happen with the time jumps, and we just won't know until we see her again next week.
Right. And the key for me here is she hasn't progressed, because I know that this is intended to be seen as like empowerment and everything, but what really happened here was that Lonnie's intel meant that Luthen could serve up this option for revenge on a platter to Bix.
And make her feel like she's empowered, which is exactly what a parental figure or mentor or whatever does to vixens.
Right.
They make them feel empowered. You can be aggressive, but you're only allowed to do what I tell you to do.
Right. So really, she's not gonna progress to the hero stage of any kind, no matter what type of hero she is. But she's not going to progress to that stage until she breaks away from both Cassian and Luthen. She cannot remain dependent on them. She has to do things for herself, make decisions on her own. She has to claim her agency. And that doesn't just mean, I get back at the guy that tortured me. It means I do things that potentially separate me from these mentors.
Yeah, and also from the rebellion too. Like if she chose to not continue on doing work for the rebellion and settle down somewhere away from Cassian.
Right.
And that was her choice. That would show she's like doing her own thing.
Yeah, like so choosing to leave the rebellion, even if it wasn't, to your point, to settle down somewhere peacefully, maybe she does take the aggressive turn. But if she does it independently, like if she, for instance, had said, I'm never going to be free until I take revenge on Gorst, and then she went out and found him actively on her own.
But we know that didn't happen. Right,
but that would have been still a progression for her.
Yes,
as
absolutely.
It is, this is a lateral move, to your point.
And from a heroine's journey perspective, the first part of it often sort of follows the hero's journey. So she's gone into the dark. She is confronting her own dragon in there. And she believes that this is the boon of success that she needs to get back on her way. In the heroine's journey, that means that she is going to be confronted by the feminine and the goddess, and proven that she actually does not know what she's talking about. And
the boys' club does not satisfy.
The boys' club does not satisfy. What she is getting in the way she is getting it from Cassian and Luthen is not satisfactory to her if it follows that progression. We'll see. I mean, it's interesting, at least. I'm happy to move her out of the damsel phase, even if it's another negative archetype, an aggressive one. But we'll talk a little bit more about that in detail when we see more of the movement and what it means.
Yeah. But so the last thing I'll say kind of as we wrap up here is I thought that what we would get in these 3 episodes would be the full Ghorman arc. And I think it's very obvious this is not all of Ghorman because we have not seen yet how it ends. So I am curious the structure of the next few episodes and how much time is still spent on Ghorman. I like Ghorman. I don't mind them doing more there. But I am starting to feel like the scale of the rebellion feels too small for what we know it has to be by this point.
Yeah.
And so I'm not sure how they're going to resolve that and get us to the point where it is the sprawling thing that we see in Rogue One. Because it's a big rebel alliance by that time.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And we need to see Yavin 4 set up. And obviously Cassian didn't go back there, so
no.
He just knows the planet exists.
There's a lot that they need to do in a period of 2 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And we only have like 2 weeks left, right? So, but it's been a pleasure to have you along for this deep dive journey. We talked a lot. Thank you for staying with us this whole time, even if you had to pause. We really love your comments and your feedback about everything that we talked about. So thank you so much for tuning in and giving us some feedback back. All right, everyone. Missy, where can people find you if they're looking for you online?
Yes, please look for me on Tumblr, where I am All Girls Are Princesses.
Amazing. All right, everyone. See you next week. Cheers. Thank you for listening to What the Force. I'm Marie-Claire Gould, your host. Our orchestral music is by Christy Carew for What the Force. You can support the show directly on Patreon at patreon.com/whattheforce. We would like to thank all our patrons, especially those who love and are obsessed with What the Force: Christian R., Adrian, Sarah Joy, Scott, John, In Wild Space, Minky Moo, Derek C., How Rude, Christian Luca, Carly Ann, and Scott C. Support the show by wearing the Force with our merch. Like and subscribe on YouTube, or leave a 5-star review on iTunes or other pod apps. It helps people find the show. You can connect with us on Blue Sky at WT Force, What the Force Podcast on Facebook, or on our website at whattheforce.ca, or our Discord. Links are in the liner notes. Feel free to reach out and start a conversation. Cheers.